Hey everybody, I'm Dr. Whitney Kosters, Professor of English, and this lecture is about qualitative and quantitative data, what they actually are, how they function differently, and why confusing the two is one of the most common reasons student research papers fall apart even when the sources are credible and the effort is high. If your research paper has ever looked strong on the surface but has still felt unstable, then keep watching because this problem shows up constantly. Students collect statistics, include quotes from articles, cite reputable sources, and still end up with claims that feel overstated, vague, or poorly supported. When that happens, the issue is almost always that the evidence being used can't actually support the kind of claim being made. So, this video is designed to help you prevent that outcome by making one principle completely explicit from the beginning. Different kinds of data are designed to answer different kinds of questions, and strong research depends on matching the question, the claim, and the data so that they're all doing compatible work. To understand how this works, we need to clarify what data actually means in research writing. Data is not just numbers or quotes. In research, data is any form of evidence that has been collected or analyzed systematically to answer a question. What matters is not what the evidence looks like, but what kind of insight it can responsibly produce. Broadly speaking then, research data falls into two categories, quantitative and qualitative. Now, quantitative data measures. It answers questions about how much, how many, how often, how widespread, or how strongly related things are. Quantitative data is used when a claim depends on scale, frequency, prevalence, comparison, or change over time. And so this is the kind of data used to establish patterns across large groups rather than individual experience. You see quantitative data constantly in real contexts. For instance, governments use it to track unemployment rates, population change, disease spread, and economic trends. Schools use it to analyze enrollment, graduation rates, and assessment outcomes. And companies use it to measure customer behavior, sales patterns, and performance metrics. In each case, the purpose is the same. It is to show how common something is, how large it is, or whether it is increasing or decreasing. On the other hand, qualitative data interprets meaning rather than measuring scale. So it answers questions about how people experience something, how they understand it, how they describe it, and how it functions in real situations. Qualitative data is used when a claim depends on motivation, perception, belief, language, or lived experience. You can see this constantly in the real world with journalists who use interviews to understand how policies affect people, educators who use classroom observation to understand learning environments, and researchers who analyze narratives, conversations, and texts to understand how ideas circulate and shape behavior. In these cases, the goal is not counting experiences, but understanding them. It is important to remember that neither type of data is automatically stronger or more legitimate. Each one is only effective when it matches the question being asked, and this is where many student papers run into trouble, so it helps to state a rule clearly. The type of claim being made determines the type of data required. If a claim is about how widespread something is, how common it is, or whether it's increasing or decreasing, qualitative evidence alone isn't going to support that claim because a few interviews, anecdotes, or examples can't establish scale. They can illustrate experience, but they can't show prevalence. If a claim is about why people behave a certain way, how they interpret a situation, or what something means in practice, then quantitative evidence alone can't fully support that claim. Stats can show patterns, but they can't explain motivation or experience on their own. Now, this distinction becomes clearer when we look at concrete examples. Imagine a city deciding whether to expand public transportation. If the questions are about how many residents currently use public transit, whether ridership has increased, or how commute times have changed, quantitative data is essential. City planners would rely on ridership stats, traffic counts, survey results, and time-based measurements because those sources establish scale and change. But now let's imagine a different question about the same topic. Why do some residents refuse to use public transportation even when it's affordable and accessible? That question can't be answered by numbers alone. It requires qualitative data such as interviews, focus groups, or community feedback that reveal concerns about safety, stigma, convenience, or trust. So the topic is the same, but the questions are different, and thus the data must change with the question. This pattern appears across disciplines. In healthcare research, if the goal is to determine whether a treatment reduces symptoms, quantitative data is required. Clinical trials, dosage measurements, and recovery rates establish effectiveness and risk. But if the goal is to understand how patients experience that treatment, whether they feel heard by providers or why some patients stop following a prescribed plan, qualitative data becomes necessary. Interviews and patient narratives explain barriers that numbers alone just can't. So the rule is strong research always begins by deciding what kind of understanding the paper needs to produce. Many student papers struggle because sources are collected before that decision is even clear, and the result is evidence that does not quite fit the claim. At this point, it does help to look at how each type of data is produced. Quantitative data usually comes from methods designed to standardize measurement. So think surveys with numerical scales, experiments, controlled studies, polls, analytics, and large data sets collected by institutions. You'll often find quantitative data in government reports, public health databases, economic indicators, polling organizations, and peer-reviewed scientific studies. The real strength of quantitative methods is that they allow comparisons across large groups and reveal trends that individual observations can't show. The limitation, though, is that they simplify reality in order to measure it, which means context and nuance can be reduced. Now, qualitative data usually comes from methods designed to observe and interpret. These include interviews, focus groups, ethnographic observation, case studies, textual analysis, discourse analysis, and open-ended survey responses. In academic work, qualitative studies carefully explain how participants were selected, how data was analyzed, and how patterns or themes were identified. Now, the strength of qualitative methods is depth, because they explain how people make meaning and why patterns exist, but their limitation is that they don't easily generalize to entire populations. This difference explains a very common research mistake. Writers often assume numbers are objective facts and qualitative evidence is just opinion. But in reality, both are rigorous when collected carefully, and both can mislead when used incorrectly. For example, a survey might show that a large percentage of people distrust the media. That quantitative data establishes a pattern, but without qualitative data, a writer cannot responsibly explain why that distrust exists. On the other hand, interviews might reveal deep distrust among participants. Those experiences are real and meaningful, but they can't establish how widespread that distrust is. This is where mixed methods research becomes useful when it's done intentionally. Mixed methods research combines quantitative and qualitative data to answer different parts of the same problem. For example, a study on food industry might use quantitative data to show how many people are affected and which populations are most vulnerable. Qualitative data might then explain how stigma, access barriers, or cultural factors shape people's experiences. The two forms of data are not repeating each other. They are doing different kinds of work. Now, problems can appear when evidence is added without purpose. Including a stat without explaining what it measures or adding a quote without explaining what insight it provides weakens an argument rather than strengthening it. So to make this usable during writing, here is a concrete process to follow. First, write the claim in plain language. State exactly what the paragraph is asserting. Second, identify what kind of claim it is. Ask whether the claim is about scale, frequency, or change, or whether it's about experience, meaning, or motivation. Third, check the data being used. Ask what kind of data it is and what kind of claim it can responsibly support. Fourth, if the data doesn't match the claim, don't force it. Either change the claim or replace the data. Don't try to stretch evidence beyond what it can do. Fifth, repeat this check at the paragraph level. Every paragraph should rely on evidence that matches this type of claim being made. Now, this approach turns research into judgment rather than accumulation. Remember, strong research is not about stacking sources. It's about using evidence deliberately. Across disciplines, the methods change because the questions change, but what always stays consistent is the alignment between question, data, and claim. So remember this distinction. Qualitative data explains experience and meaning. Quantitative data establishes patterns and scale. And strong research uses each where it makes sense, names its limits clearly, and avoids forcing evidence to do work it was never designed to do. I do hope this lecture was helpful for your research purposes. If it was, be sure to explore my other videos on research writing, source evaluation, and critical thinking. In some of those videos, I talk about everything from how to use academic databases, to how to find credible sources, to how to write a thesis statement, to how to identify misinformation, and more. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Be well.